Welcome, everyone. This is an open door. It is Friday, November 22nd. And this is Reality Check. And wherever you are, whether you're here in this Zoom room with us, and for some reason, I just started, like, this body just started to cry and get a little lightheaded. I take that as a very good sign that the energy is starting to move here. Um, if you would join me, whether you're here in this room with us right now or listening to the recording, in stepping away from wherever you were, even a minute ago, and bring yourself here. Our intention in this space, right now it's with Reality Check, is to allow for a direct experience of the truth. To not only discuss the pointings in whatever piece of literature we're working with, but to open and soften and allow the experience of those pointings to fill us. Feel the shift, and I'm very grateful. We're working with Reality Check. This is our second hour. Last week we got through page and a half of the intro, chapter 1, and we'll begin with chapter 2 in a few minutes. But first, wow, I tell you, the energy is flowing so much that I almost feel like I'm being pushed off the chair. I have a 5-minute clip from Helen. It feels really cool. She's talking about self-inquiry, and since chapter 2 is on self-inquiry, it feels like a great place for us to come in. I can tell you, in all honesty, and this is my trust and faith in the teacher and the being that's Helen, that I saw the clip. I know how long it is. I listened to the first 20 seconds and then I said, nope, this personality wants to hear it for the first time with everybody else. So let's listen and we'll work with the book. Here we go.
Self-inquiry is, again, very largely misunderstood as a mental process. It's really important to kind of distinguish between thinking about yourself and actually looking. Self-inquiry is a very, very simple process of actually looking at what you are. The major benefit of actually looking at what you are is it begins to quieten our mind without us even trying. So we can't be paying attention to what we think we are and actually experiencing directly what we are at the same time. It's one or the other. So self-inquiry is a really good means of beginning to bring attention away from the head and towards the heart, or towards the direct experience of what we are. And it starts with a question. It starts with, what am I, or who am I? And begins perhaps with mental answers, with our mind suggesting, well, I'm me, I know I'm this person. If we allow that question to continue within our being, to kind of sink a little deeper, we begin to have direct experiences of what we are. So there might be moments where we experience a kind of profound silence, or a piece that really perhaps we haven't touched upon before, something different to what we normally experience as human beings. Self-inquiry is really inquiring about what our self actually is, rather than our default setting as human beings is to think about things. Nothing wrong with that, except it just makes more noise. The antidote, if you will, is self-inquiry, and that's to draw our attention away from thoughts and towards a direct experience. When we ask any question, we're going to receive lots of different types of answer. So if I ask myself, what actually am I? My mind might suggest certain ideas. I might have a certain feeling within my body in response to that question. And then a deeper answer even than that is some sort of silence, or we become more aware of the background of our experience. It moves to the forefront of our experience. Self-inquiry is a way of opening ourselves up and beginning to allow in this natural state, which most of us have been conditioned to completely ignore in our everyday experience. Self-inquiry is really the most simple of practices, just asking a question and beginning to recognize all the answers that are coming from that question. Most of us stop at the mental answers that come. We can really have a look at that, and is there any deeper answers to my question? Are there any further answers? Are there any more answers? If you see that as human beings, we're trained to just look for the one answer. This is the right one. I've got an answer, that's it now. But self-inquiry can be a kind of meditation in itself, living with a question and experiencing all the ways that we're receiving answers about that question. It's quite a beautiful thing, really.
Can you give us an example of that, like a question that might happen, a situation where that might happen?
Situation where that might happen. Let's say there's a person that we're in a confrontation with. Most people have in their life someone that rubs them up the wrong way. A good way to use self-inquiry is you can even ask, who really is this person? Most of us have a mental picture. For example, if you and I got into an argument, I might have built up a picture of you being a very confrontational person, and somebody that I don't particularly like or I don't agree with. And so next time I meet you, I'm coming at you with this idea already here about what I'm going to experience. And of course, most times it goes that way. If instead I can quietly ask myself, who actually are you, really? Of course, noticing my mind will have many opinions about you in that moment. But inside, I can ask that question and allow some space for the answer. I might find that my experience with you goes very differently, because we will always experience what we are putting our attention upon. If I put my attention upon my thoughts about you, then I'm going to get a rerun of yesterday's experience. If I'm asking a question and allowing my experience to go deeper in that moment with you, I might find that my thoughts have been played out rather than what you're actually like. I may even have a startling revelation that I don't really know anything about you, that I've only so far experienced what I've thought to be true about you.
So, the way we've been inspired to do this is we will begin reading where we left off last week. We take turns reading. And at any given time, including before we begin, if anyone here would like to share what's coming up for them, or have a desire to slow things down, or to inquire into, then you don't really even have to raise your hand. Just go ahead and unmute, share. So there is a space to do that before we begin to read. If anyone has anything they'd like to say or share before we start the reading. Remember, anytime you want. Rana has agreed, I believe, she's agreed to begin the reading for us. I will pull the book up so that we could all look at it together. It's all yours, Rana. You can stop whenever you'd like to.
Okay.
And if anyone can interrupt you at any given time.
Absolutely.
All right.
Good morning,
All yours.
everyone. So we're going to begin chapter 2, discovering that you are formless. This chapter will help you to discover what you really are, and it will begin to undo some of the main assumptions in our thinking process that keep us from seeing clearly. We will use the time-old process of self-inquiry to begin to understand what we are. Self-inquiry is simply when we look at what we are rather than thinking about it. It is where we directly experience what we actually are, which is important because our mind cannot get in the way of this process. If you sit here and think, I am the unlimited reality that is infinite and all-pervading, then it will not help you unless you actually directly come to know that beyond just thinking about it. Only by directly experiencing what you really are will you begin to see clearly. If we merely think about this, then our assumptions about ourselves will alter what we perceive. Whatever we believe to be true about ourselves, the world, and life, we will directly experience as very real indeed. Most of us believe that we are separate human beings, born and due to live for a certain number of years before we die, and this is what we experience as real. The actuality of our existence is very different, though, and we must come to know it without relying on thoughts.
Hey, Rana,
Yeah.
just stop for a second. I just want to acknowledge that as you were reading those last two lines, and my having read them before, this belief that what I am is a human being having this experience. It's interesting. My hands are shaking. There's a real belief that that is true, and there's something that's inviting it to soften, and I'm feeling the resistance. So there is a curiosity among the group, you or others, if that simple line is affecting you at all. Maybe it's just me. Something here doesn't want to believe, like something here is struggling with, like, I accept that it's not true, that I am a limited being, and yet there's this sense of a limited being that doesn't want to consider the alternative. And I'm just bringing that out into the light of where we are.
I appreciate that, Cindy, because as usual, you will get to the truth on the surface, and then you ask yourself somehow if you can go deeper, and then you do. And so I think that's, my sense is that's what you're doing for all of us right now, because there is usually I don't know what the word for it is. There's usually a part of the mind that is like a little cockroach, and it's very willing to go and hide behind the rock or go into the small crack in the wall and say, I'm not here, I'm not here, I'm not here. There's nothing here. There's nothing to look at. When actually, maybe there is something to look at. So I appreciate what you're saying. I won't belabor it, but thank you.
Kendall writes, what comes up for me is the depth of the programming. And it got chills because essentially that's what I'm noticing in this moment. How easy it is for the separate self to accept that line as true. And as soon as I sit with what I just said, it feels insane. Sandra, please.
What came up to me is that the sort of tension, that there's something beneficial in that's happening for you and for me. When that comes up for me, there is something there that, and I can't pretend to understand all of it, but because I'm feeling, if I feel that way, because I'm feeling that way, I know that that just means I'm supposed to feel that way in that moment, and therefore it's something beneficial in it.
Yes, I agree. Anna, you ready to continue? Hit the screen share again, unless there's more.
Sure.
Okay.
There is nothing wrong with thoughts at all. Many processes and issues in our daily life require a logical thought process. But to awaken fully to the reality of what you are, we need to put thought aside for a while. And what this actually reminds me just for a moment is, affirmations. They may seem like they feel good in a moment, but just to question myself, do I really believe that? I am the light of the world. Am I just thinking that? So I'm going to throw that in there. I'll go through one more paragraph and then I'll hand it off. Each thought we believe will begin to color our experience of the truth, just as sure as wearing colored spectacles will color the world we see with our eyes. When we consider that most of the thoughts we believe to be true are totally under our conscious radar, and we do not know what they are, then we get into some very unreliable experience of what truth is, what we are. It is necessary to always and only use your direct experience to verify what is true. We must be able to experience it and prove it within ourselves so that we can know for certain it is true. Anything else is just adding to the mountain of thoughts that flies through most people's heads and will not help us. We do not need to stop thoughts nor eliminate the mind. In fact, to try to do so will not help at all. We simply need to discern what answers we are willing to take as valid in our self-inquiry. So even if thoughts are there, we can say, thank you very much, mind, and only accept a direct experience. So I'd like to share, like in a practical sense, right? As I start an inquiry process, every time I say, who am I hear, I'm me, and then to go deeper than that, though, what am I? And then comes, answers like I'm a woman, I'm 57, and like looking at that, those are just statements. They're not true per se. I mean, heck, you guys didn't know how old I was for weeks because there was so much, around what age, and so I like this feeling that I can go under that question. I can hear that answer and be like, okay, thanks for sharing. What's next? What else is here? And to have that trust and confidence that something arises. I can't put words to it, but something arises, like in her video when she talked about when we're going for these deeper answers, there's a silence. And I had never experienced that prior to coming around these teachings. You know, there was prayer, there were affirmations, but there wasn't this silence. So grateful to be here. Thank you.
Amy.
This is probably obvious to most people, but I would like to get any feedback that is, comes up for folks. She says in the last sentence, so even though thoughts are there, we can say, thank you very much, mind, and only accept direct experience. And the name of this book is Reality Check. So it just comes to me that the more we can sink into our direct experience right now in the moment, in all the ways that's presenting itself to us, whether that's through bodily sensations, emotions, sounds, thoughts, just in the moment. And that's self-inquiry, like what is being experienced now in all the possible ways that this being can, for lack of a better word, identify or sink into, then that's a good practice. And I just thought I'd lay that out. And the reason that I've been back and forth on the screen is that I reached over for something and a glass full of water just went all over my desk. And that was as we began the class. And I thought, well, I'm just going to sit here and see what happens. I'm not going to rush to clean it up and see what happens. So that's what I did. Like, how do I feel about this? It was one of my favorite glasses. What is this? Just not even thinking about it. Just, what's happening right now? I'm in the church of what's happening right now. I'm probably going to say that over and over and over again because I just love that. But just love anybody's feedback on that.
Well, I'm having fairly intense direct experience at the moment. And for me, direct experience is sensation, feeling, emotion, without a story of a before or after attached to it. And one of the coolest things about the experience is how often when I'm in the experience that I'm in right now, and it's a pretty intense physical sensation, there's also this weird sense of pulling, and it's as if, I call it the self-referencing eye filtering system, but it's as if it's currently on vacuum mode and it's attempting to pull my intention out of the direct physical experience I'm having and into a story about why it's happening. The truth is, no clue why it's happening. And I can feel that. And I can also feel like that sense of describing why it's happening. The moment the words are put on the why it's happening, the direct experience of the sensations become muted. So the question arises before we go back to the book, does anyone have a question about what is meant here by direct experience, or does anyone want to talk about what direct experience means to them in this moment before we see what's next? Alka, is Alka going to unmute?
Right. When I was reading the second chapter, I read it before, and she talked about how we are formless and whatever. 15 years ago, I had this experience for the first time of expanding. I expanded out of the house onto the road and whatever. And for 15 years, I have thought that that was my physical body doing that. And it was a big revelation to me when I read this chapter that that was me. And when people talk about what is the gender and do you have shape and were you born, they are actually talking about this expansion. Like, so it's totally changed now the way I'm looking at things for the moment. And I mean, it happens a lot, but and every time I thought that was my body doing it. Funny. But here we are. That's my personal experience. And it's
Beautiful.
really helped me to look at things differently. And I know what people are talking about now.
Wonderful.
So that's all I have.
Shall we continue to read? And is anyone feeling
I
guided?
I
Oh,
want to
Amy, go.
say, Alka, once again, your choice of colors is just stunning. And I want to thank you for sharing that experience because that was a reality check. You know, when you shared that experience, it just brought to mind for me when I first realized. And it reminds me of Rupert Spira when he's with Francis Lucille, and there are things that they hear going on outside, around them, outside the room. And Rupert realizes, I'm not hearing what's outside. It's arising in me. The hearing is arising in me. It's not that I am hearing something out there. The knowing of the hearing is arising within me. And that was, so I thank you for that.
So the reality is there's no out there. There's no in here, is what is being sensed right now. When Alka, you said, you know, basically this form is an extension and it's just all one thing. It's very helpful. Thank you.
In this paragraph, what really was helpful to me is only accept a direct experience. That helps me and it explains to me. I don't like to use the word conflict, but what you were describing, Cindy, I have that feeling a lot, like a tension. And it explained to me that when I'm in these rooms and I'm listening to different teachers and I'm reading these books, some of the ideas and concepts are not the direct in line with the direct experience. And that creates a little dissonance in the brain, in the mind. So this just reaffirmed that the best teacher, the only teacher really, is the wisdom within. And it's okay that I don't, that's not my experience. I don't have to question it. I don't have to resist it, because that's just not, this just really helps me accept my direct experience, accept what I know for certain. And that knowing comes over again and again. And when it's not there, I don't have to even analyze it, evaluate it, let the mind go crazy with it.
Amy.
one more quick thing. Direct experience can be happening on many levels, multidimensionally. So the more we sink into the direct experience, the more we may open to a whole multiplicity of sensations, thoughts, understandings, awarenesses. Just want to say that.
That reflects back to the man we were listening to yesterday. One of the things that I heard him say was the brain is an inhibitor. And so when I'm relaxing and sinking back, that inhibition is being lifted. And like Amy just said, there may be more, whoa, I got chills all over me right now. There may be something else to experience directly on a level I don't expect, right? Bang.
Let me see if I can clarify my understanding of the direct experience. With what Sandra said. When Sandra was saying she experienced dissonance in the mind, that for me was the experience, the direct experience. The dissonance was the direct experience, not what she was reading or hearing from other people or thinking. It was the dissonance. Is that right?
Sandra, I think, yeah. Is that
Whatever.
your under, yeah. But I mean, is that your direct experience, Sandra?
The direct experiences that I have frequently don't have any conflict at all in them. It's when the mind, when I'm trying to, what I was describing was about teaching and learning, and I love being introduced to all these, since I've been in this community and the other community, being introduced to so many different teachers and so much of which there's an underlying reality and truth that I recognize from direct experience. What I was talking about with dissonance was sometimes I'll be hearing something and I'll be thinking, no, and that's all in the mind. It's kind of like what Amy was saying. It's like in the mind that's resisting it and saying, that's not my direct experience. That's what I was trying to say.
Well, for me, that is my direct experience.
Yeah, mine's so peaceful and so knowing and so big. It doesn't feel like there's a lot of room there isn't any room for that. It's just absolute knowing. So the conflict and the intellectualizing and which the Sandra character is very good at, by the way, evaluating, synthesis, analysis, taking it apart, picking it apart. That is not happening in a direct experience, is what I'm saying, for me.
I'm the same way. I overthink things, and I've been told that by some people, and so but that is my direct experience at that moment. When I'm doing that, I then can choose again to go back into the stillness or the peaceful state of mind, and no thought state of mind. But when I entertain my thoughts and I analyze, which I'm conditioned to do over all these years, that's why my at that moment, that's my direct experience. So I'm trying to understand what you're experiencing is my goal. I want to experience that peace and love every moment of every moment. But my direct experience, as I understand it, what am I experiencing right now in this moment? And if it's peace, love, great. Am I identifying as a separate self? I don't think so when I'm in that state of mind. I'm just easing. I'm just easiness. I'm just in the flow. But when I have a when I'm thinking about anything other than just being in this, that's my direct experience. So I'm not sure I'm getting this.
And so I feel, especially with the with what just showed up in the chat, which I'll read it, I'm willing to give my take on it. If that's okay. Well, it is okay. Could the question that came up, could the phrase direct experience be synonymous with the word presence? And I love that question. Because it clarifies how I hold it. I describe being in presence or practicing presence with what Sandra was describing. Presence is still, it's open, it's the truth of who I am. Direct experience for me is there's a recognition here that there's still this separate self character who is feeling separate from presence, separate from the ground of being. And when I can hold that character in my awareness from the expanded state of presence, the separate self goes through her gymnastics. And the direct experience in that moment can sometimes be really uncomfortable. And when I place words to it, Alka and I are both, we do dyads. I don't know if anyone else here does dyads on any kind of regular basis. What I practice within the dyad space is putting words to the sense that right now there's an experience of dizziness or contraction or anger is arising. That is a direct experience of the present moment being communicated, while more and more I'm able to witness it from this state of being, from the ground of being, from presence. So I'm grateful for the question. Presence is that larger space. And there's this practice of allowing the anger, the contraction, the fear, right now, there is a sense, we put that word, I've been loving that word dissonance. And so right now, there's a sense that there is something within the Cindy character or within this sense of an individual being that feels out of alignment with letting go and just being formless. Like it's saying, no, you know? And so there's a dissonance between the two. And I am doing my best to say the direct experience right now feels a little wonky. For those that are watching the replay,
I really have. Thank you for that. Yeah.
All right. Thank you. All right. Shall we keep reading? And is there anyone here inspired to read?
I'll read.
Okay. Let me just pull this up. All right.
Oh, this is so beautiful. Thank you, everyone. So self-inquiry is as simple as asking, what am I really? And seeing what answer we find. We will always find thought answers, of course, and there's nothing wrong with these. Mind will have many things to say about what we are. What can we experience directly, though, is something very different to what you may have expected. What will you find from your self-inquiry? Nothing. You will experience nothing at all, and this is the perfect answer. When we self-inquire, and ask what we really are, we may experience a vast space that seems empty, void, and with no substance at all. And it can seem unsettling or strange to us at first, perhaps even a little frightening. If we keep looking at that vastness, we begin to get used to it. This vast nothingness is what we really are. But it is not at all what we thought we are. And so it will take some adjusting. I put a little heart by that line. This vast nothingness is not a thing at all, and it most certainly not the someone we expected to find. It is formless and shapeless, and yet it is very much present. May I add the word loving to that? Remember, we are only going to take our direct experience that we can know as truth here. Also remember here that we are only just finding out now what we have always been, no matter how long we may have believed, assumed, and experienced ourselves as separate and limited human beings. It has never been so, never. You are now coming to see what you have always been.
Can we stop for just a second? What was coming up for me, especially in that stopping point? And for some reason, it's the voice of Adi Ashante. But now it's also Amy. this remembering that at least within this experience, we're not looking for an endpoint. That word adjusting, right? And also there's this space, for some reason, memories have been shooting out of my system. I don't even know where they're coming from. But again, for anyone that was here before the meeting started, I decided that I'm being massaged by God all day long. So I'm not questioning the experience. I'm just allowing it all to happen. But this understanding that as long as this experience of being a somebody in a world is continuing, then the invitation is just to sink into it and to understand that even though I'm continually, now I'm being Abraham, asking for the next higher thought, there's no endpoint in that. Amy's, are you just agreeing, or does that make sense? Because it's so useful for me to let go of thinking that there is this human worldly goal.
So for me, I just wanted to add that even though I find that I'm vast and I'm open and I'm a no thing, there is this embodiment of it that is very pleasurable and warm and glowing. And I don't know if other people have that with it, but for me, there is, while I'm not a body, there's somehow the body reacts to that direct experience with joy and, you know.
Somebody, oh, Amy.
I sometimes, but as Rupert and Francis and others say, it's also impersonal.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
it accepts everything, and it's unlimited in its expression, and it's full and it's empty at the same time. So I wouldn't say, in my experience, that it's always bliss and joy, I think that is a relative term. It may just be contentment or nothingness. And if I'm feeling particularly distressed and I quiet and access that inner space, then relatively the experience of nothingness is actually just totally content. And so it's not like it's always, I go straight into joy.
No, yeah, I think I use the word joy differently than the typical way we use joy, but yes, I relate to what you said. Thank you, Amy.
Was it you, Rana? I feel like somebody started to speak.
Yeah, it was me. I don't remember what I was gonna say before, but when I'm really thinking about this, thinking about this, pausing and looking, there's almost like a detaching, a moving back from any sense of form. You know, like especially when the eyes are closed and the experiment goes, you know, where does your leg hit the chair? And is there really a boundary there? You know, and that experience for me and looking at that kind of erases a sense of the body. And for me, it's not, there's no feeling when I get there. Nothingness has to be the best description for me. But it doesn't feel, it still feels warm and inviting and you know, so just trying to put to words, I guess, the direct experience I have here, when that happens. There's just a sense of expansion, like there's no end here. There's no boundary here. This is just all in it. So, thanks.
Want to keep reading, Sandra?
Okay, if no one else, would anyone else like to read? Okay,
You know, I have a question just quickly. I'm wondering if these descriptions for people that aren't sharing, if these descriptions, or putting into words what direct experiences are resonating with anybody too, you know? Are you having similar experiences or vastly different ones? I'm curious. So thanks.
Oh, Barbie.
To answer Rona's question, I do have the same experience. Last night, I went to sleep with the sleeping meditation on day 4, and I fell asleep sometime during it. I ended up on day 3 just to listen to the music, but it was a healing meditation. And what I experienced was, I'm in another realm where electricity is healing my body. And after I fell asleep, I was trying to talk, but I couldn't talk. But my mind was talking, I couldn't say anything. But I was being held like in the arms or in like a cradle or whatever. And all I seen was stars in the sky. And then when I got off the couch to go to the bed, I still wasn't thinking, but I was still held in that space with just sleeping under the dark sky with the stars. And I was content and joyous, and I felt my body was slowly healing. But I have nice experiences when I'm in pain, and when I'm in pain, I have bad ones, but I take it, whatever I take, whatever I experience, it's for me. Whatever I'm doing, it's for me. And eventually I'll get there. but I do have the same experiences as everybody else does. But mine's maybe a little weirder at times.
Oh,
You don't get to be weirder.
I think everything's uniquely tailored for each of us. I just keep getting that thought.
All right.
Shall I read or?
Yeah,
there-
it's for my own good. Whatever comes up is for my own good.
I love that, Barbie.
Thank you.
Okay. Ask the question again and see what you find. You will find the same thing again and every single time you ask. It is just you, and you are formless and everywhere. If you stay in that direct experience and ask some questions of yourself based on that nothingness, you may be surprised at what you find. So we've all heard these questions before. Are you tangible or intangible? Are you over here or over there? Do you have any shape or color? Where exactly are you? Are you changing, growing, becoming, here as this vastness? What time is it in the vastness? How far do you reach and where do you end? Do you end at all? When did this vastness that you are appear? When will it disappear? Were you born as this? When did you start? Is there you and another person here? Where do you stop and the person next to you start? Really like that last question, especially when I'm in this community. I feel like there is no beginning and ending between people. Sometimes it's like, they're just all one.
I like the question, where exactly are you?
I question myself is, I'm what we always, what she's saying here, infinite awareness, let's call it that for a label for now. Why is my awareness always as Richard? Why doesn't my experience differ from being to being? Maybe that's all part of the time thing or the finite thing, but I wonder that sometimes if I'm everything, why am my experience only Richard? If I'm everything, why isn't my experience? And it is when I see you all in these meetings. I see. I think I've said this before. Thank you for being all that we are. So we are each expressions of the oneness that we are. And that's the only way I can put it in any sense. But my day-to-day experience in time is always as Richard. So and my experience and then is colored by Richard's conditioning, as is each of us experiencing a separate stuff as our conditioning. But we're basically all this infinite awareness that we I don't know. I think too much. But I love thinking too much. So that's okay too.
Well, Richard, so this is, while you're saying that, there's calling it Melanie's not in the room. I'm calling it an experiment in consciousness that's happening here right now. And I said that just because Amy and Melanie both are students of Jenny Beal, right? So everything is an experiment. But I've been, I'm getting tears again. So I know this is very useful for me. I've been inspired to take your question to me in a very specific way. I have a friend who was diagnosed with cancer this week. She means a great deal to me. She's not in this room. And I've noticed, now I'm being of use. Cindy, the personality, is fairly transparent often, right? And so she's calling me every day now, and we're working together and everything, you know, I know I'm being of use. And I have noticed that when I'm not specifically working, Cindy working as a minister, where I'm not thinking about me, and my attention turns to her, it becomes all about me. So I've noticed that while the Cindy character is active, I cannot be selfless and hold a space. Every single thought is relative in some way to how another's experience is affecting me. And there's something very uncomfortable about that in a good way. Like I'm really knocking against this sense that what I am is not another. And there's a real selfish kind of experience of I, Cindy, am not in another's experience. I wasn't diagnosed with cancer. I'm not going through the tests. I'm not having to have this whatever happening. And yet there's a contraction, there's a fear, there's a concern, there's a sadness, there's a wishing this wasn't happening, but it's not happening to Cindy. And yet all of those experiences are happening to Cindy. And while they're happening to me, the more I sit with it, the less I'm holding the other in a loving space. And I'm realizing that as long as Cindy is active, like you were talking about, why can't Richard see himself as another? I feel useless in the experience. Like it's a really weird kind of feeling. Like, is this how selfish Cindy is? She's literally not extending love in a selfless manner when Cindy's active. She's like, every
Cindy,
conversation is now about this experience she's having, and what about me, and what about wanting to go on vacation, and whatever. Like
it's
it's
okay
crazy.
though. It's okay,
Oh yeah,
Cindy. I'm sorry.
no, go. I'm just saying that I'm watching that. I'm not judging this for having it. It's a subtle noticing of something very similar to what Richard was saying. This idea that, you know, as long as the Cindy self-referencing eye filtering system is on,
Well,
everything is going through her filtering system. Go ahead, Ron. Oh, Amy.
that's what we love about you, Cindy, is your constant self-inquiry and your constant willingness to share with us what comes up for you. It's like you look at yourself sometimes under a microscope, but that's not really what I mean exactly. Just quickly, what comes from me when you say that is, I think it was Atmananda, but I can't remember, talking about when you look at yourself, when you go in and you find that formless, empty space, and it feels like nothingness to you, but in a bad way. And there's discomfort that comes up from feeling that there's nothingness, is to go back even further to, I am the witnessing awareness that is experiencing this sense of nothingness. The nothingness sense is arising in this awareness. And we can do that with every single thing, including, oh, here's the Cindy who's feeling separate, even as she's supposed to be listening to this other person. And I'm the witnessing awareness that is accompanying that realization and the other at the same time. Good to go. This is such a great book for us to read together. And I'm so appreciative that I'm reading it with all of you. Oh my gosh. It's great. Thank you, Cindy.
Oh, well, thank us all. Anybody else want to say or speak into this space before we turn the recorder off? It's been an hour, which is kind of insane. I love us all very, very, very much. we'll pick up where we left off next week. Is everybody good with us meeting next Friday, the day after Thanksgiving? Let's do that then. Yay. All right, let's stop the recording.